sponsors or its advertisers.
Sorry about that, Bishop.
Y'all want me to play this whole intro?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
With your hosts, Bishop C. Guy Robinson and Dr. Jonathan Shepard, where we explore faith and mental health perspectives on caring for faith. Let's get into today's discussion with Spirit in Mind.
Well, great day, everyone, and welcome to Spirit in Mind, where we discuss current events with faith and mental health perspectives. I'm Bishop Guy Robinson, and it is a blessing. I count it a blessing and an honor to be able to share with you here again for another installment of Spirit in Mind. And grateful for the presence of my colleague and our co-host, Dr. Jonathan Shepard. Dr. Shepard, how are you today?
I'm well, Bishop. How are you, sir?
Doing well, doing well. Oh man, the weather has changed on us in the Baltimore area, huh?
My Lord, 50-degree swing. It was 79 degrees, I think was the record high, and it is 33 degrees as I drove into the studio today. So, yes, sir, quite a swing.
What a change. What a swing overnight. Oh my goodness. Listen, I pray with somebody that things turn in your favor. Like that. Oh my goodness. The Bible does say weeping may endure for a night, but joy comes in the morning. And so we're grateful that you're with us. And again, we really honor the privilege of being able to stay connected. And so let somebody know that it's time for Spirit in Mind. If you are in the Baltimore area, perhaps you're in your car, let someone know who you know is driving. Hey, when you get to a red light and you get a moment, go to your radio station and program in Praise 106 because it's time for Spirit in Mind. If you know somebody that's not in the car, but they have access to social media venues, meet us on one of our formats, Spirit in Mind Live. Look that up, Google us, look us up, and join us on any of our venues, be it YouTube, Facebook, all of them. Join us because it's time for Spirit in Mind. And throughout the week, we love to stay connected. So Dr. Shepard's going to share some ways that we can stay connected.
Absolutely. And Bishop just told you one of the main ways we need to stay connected through social media. Go to our YouTube channel. We need some more subscribers on there. So those who are watching us on social media, thank you. Had a lot of views last week on our personal social media pages, but we need you to go and like, and we need you to go and share, and we need for you to subscribe. So all those people who saw us last week, please go and subscribe. Do that right now, real easy. Spirit in Mind YouTube channel. You'll see our pictures there, and just hit the subscribe button and make sure that you do that notifications so that way you'll know when we go live on the air. And Bishop Robinson is also the pastor of the Tabernacle Church, and so you can see all his wonderful information if you're on our social media pages. See the various ways to contact him. He's also a noted author and speaker, and you want to make sure that you follow him on his Facebook and Instagram pages. You can reach out to me also if you're in need of direct care services. I'll be happy to service you and provide those things that you are in need of. And even as Bishop was talking about just the major swing that we saw in the weather, we pray that those things do work in your favor. But Bishop, also, I know the people's moods also swing just like the weather did.
My Lord.
They were up one day and now they're down the next. That's not to come for anybody, but I hear you out there. It can be just like that sometimes. And because of that, that's why Spirit in Mind is here to provide some stability, even when it is cold outside, even when it's warm outside. That's why we're here. So reach out to us.
Absolutely. That's what we're here for. And that was an amazing segue because we were talking about mood swings and those kind of things because we've been talking for the last couple of weeks, trying to help persons through emotional stewardship, emotional regulation. And certainly we understand that there are a lot of triggers, a lot of things that can send us to emotional places, even in our world today. And Sometimes we haven't had the best models shown, even sometimes in persons we look to for leadership in terms of outbursts and those kinds of things. So it's a really, really tumultuous time in some ways. And yet there is, what we believe, a way to kind of navigate through these storms. And emotions are real, and we certainly want to acknowledge them, but we also want to be able to have some awareness in terms of emotional regulation and that we can make healthier choices. And so, one of the things we talked about and have been talking about is something that Dr. Shepard so poignantly said. It's oftentimes a word that makes us uncomfortable or an unpopular word, and that word is discipline. Usually associated with some kind of negative experience that persons have had. So when you start talking about discipline, people kind of clam up or get defensive. But there is a healthy thing. In fact, there's a great classic book in theology called Celebration of Discipline that recognizes the important role that discipline plays in our lives. And so we're talking about emotional regulation and discipline and staying in the process in pursuit of the product or the promise that we are going after and the importance of discipline with that. And so Dr. Shepard is going to just kind of take us from there with some additional information, insights, and recaps as he feels led.
Absolutely. So we've been talking about discipline, and so by now you all should know the definition of discipline, prescribed order of conduct. And what we've been seeing is in relation to emotional regulation, how those who are experiencing emotional dysregulation, which means that emotions are kind of out of order or not allowing you to function to be in order, that discipline is necessary there. And one of the major ones that we talked about, Bishop, last time was anger, anger, anger. And we talked about the emotional anger. And as I was just doing my, again, research for this week's show and just looking at anger, we know that anger is natural. Anger is okay. It is something that is not necessarily a problem by itself. It actually could be even a valuable source of information to understand who we are, what we care about, and what's not working in our lives. If you never get angry, I'm worried about you. All right. You do need to come see me because anger is normal, but it also can be a default emotion. Say with me, default emotion when it's covering up something else. Many people might feel easier to use angry, or they might feel angry as opposed to being vulnerable in other situations. I'll say like this: it's easier to feel angry than more vulnerable emotions like sadness, shame, or fear. And research really shows that that is particularly true of men, of men, of men. And that in men, we have been socialized to show strength rather than vulnerability, which is often seen as weakness. People will view vulnerability as weakness. And so, even though we've been working through these various gender norms, and you've seen where people are trying to dismantle gender norms, let me tell you, they got a lot more work to do because it's still seen as weakness when people are vulnerable, when people are showcasing their emotions. So they'd rather be angry because it shows that they're tough and aggressive, and they'd rather avoid talking about their emotions or mental health struggles. I pointed out last week that in a Pew Research Center survey for young men, and that for young men that they felt that 69% of them felt that they would be willing to punch someone if provoked. Wow.
Mhm.
They would rather rank strength, toughness, leadership, and ambition as top qualities as opposed to respectfulness, kindness, and empathy. Those are much further down the list. And again, they felt that these young men felt that they needed to be physically or they need to be ready to physically attack other men if they are harassed or taunted. I'm gonna stop right here, Bishop. But some of you all out there right now are driving. If you're living in the Baltimore area, it is some white stuff is coming down. All right, and you might be driving, but why are they driving so slow? Why are they doing this? And you might even feel like you need to go after somebody. That's that anger that's inside of you. I want you first of all to take a deep breath and not get angry. because that's just a sign of being frustrated. But suppose you're not driving. Suppose you're doing something else. And so that anger and the inability to regulate and be disciplined so that you can handle your emotions and be able to be vulnerable during that particular season or whatever season you find yourself in is so crucial so that you're not masking what's really going on.
Oh man, Dr. Shepard, that is so helpful, particularly for us as men. It's helpful for all of us. But as you said, some of the statistics and socialization processes lean so much towards instilling in us that the only acceptable forms of masculine expression are anger and aggression. And really, in doing that, and certainly, as you said, anger is certainly a viable and very real human emotion. Even the Bible speaks of being angry, but do not sin. But the saying is have some mechanisms, some things in place that even in your anger you are mindful. And that's so very important. And when we deny those other emotions that we feel, because that's not engendered, that's not a feminine thing, it's a human thing. That we feel pain, we feel hurt, we feel confused, we feel angry. So we feel anger amongst a whole bunch of other emotions, and when we only allow ourselves to feel angry, we really cut off a piece of our humanity
Wow.
because we're so much more than that. And so that's why that's so very important that we acknowledge that so that we can be fully human, you know. And again, the scripture says, be angry, but sin not, which speaks of boundaries. And sometimes I think of it as like the process stop. Just like stop. Just stop what you're doing before you act unconsciously or just impulsively. Stop. Take a step back, observe, process, and then at least your actions are conscious and not just being impulsive. And so that's very important. Take a minute to just observe that stop process. It's so very important, and that's part of having the boundaries, the regulation. That you can have that discipline. I think last week I talked about that.
Yeah.
Even in military training, there's rules of engagement and their processes because you could have heart, but if you don't have training, you won't be effective in your warfare or in your battle because there is a such thing as strategy and there's a such thing as discipline. And sometimes we think that discipline is a bad word, but discipline is essential to victory. Two words, Dr. Shepard, and then I'll stop here, that we talked about that get misinterpreted. One was discipline, and Dr. Shepard has given us the definition for that. And then the other that we talked about was freedom.
Right. Yes.
Thinking that freedom means anarchy, no holds barred, doing whatever I want to do, whenever I want to do it, however I want to do it. But freedom actually means I'm free within a domain. And so it has boundaries. And we looked at that scripture in 1 Timothy 2, 14, 15, 16, where First Peter rather, where Peter admonishes the church and he says, listen, you're free, but don't use freedom as a cloak for vice. Don't use that as an avoidance strategy, as a rationalization for doing things that you will regret later. But he says because you're free to be a bondservant, which is a paradox, right? But it kind of reminds us that either way we're tied to something. Even theologically, Jesus said, "My yoke is easy." But you are tied to me. And so that brings, and the love of God brings constraints. It constrains us, it brings boundaries. If you're aspiring to be a doctor, certainly a physician, or a doctor in the academy, or a graduate of college, or anything we're endeavoring to do is a discipline involved in order to obtain that prize or that goal. And so that's why discipline is not a bad thing, even though some of us may have had some bad experiences with abuses. But discipline is actually necessary to achieve our goals.
Right. And so that's why we were talking about emotion regulation because people get angry when you tell them they have to be disciplined. They would rather cover up and not do the work. They would rather be angry. And actually, again, that's covering up what you truly are feeling inside because many people are fearful as opposed to being angry. They're fearful of what it's going to take for them to get to the other side. They're fearful of what it's going to take for them to be able to accomplish that thing. And, Bishop, I was just, again, looking at my research, and people ask the question, well, are men angrier than women? No, women are just as angry as men. All right. I think I have some women people out there who will agree. They may just show it a little differently. All right. They might not be as demonstrative in the anger. Now, again, there are some women who are demonstrative in their anger, absolutely. but but men tend to show their anger outwardly and display more aggression more often than women do. But women are just as angry as men get or men become. Act on their anger just as frequently. And, Bishop, I was, again, reading, and it all just nicely ties together as we're looking at the discipline piece and why so many people struggle with that. Um, I was reading, even in my own study time over the past week, in the book of Hebrews, chapter 12, when it talks about God's discipline and how he proves his love for us. And I was reading that about how our earthly fathers, they disciplined us just for a few years, doing the best they knew how, but how God's discipline is always good for us so that we may share in his holiness. That's what the word says. We're following along Hebrews chapter 12, verse 10 and 11. But here's the thing that I really loved about that. It said that no discipline is enjoyable while it's happening. It's painful. And I always remember the definition, Bishop, as you helped me to understand what pain is. Pain is that gap between expectation and experience.
Mhm.
And so one of the reasons why we get so frustrated is because we had these certain expectations of what something was going to be, but our experience was much different from what we actually saw or what or I guess I'm using the word again, experience. So it was that gap there. And so, yeah, you look at how, man, I didn't realize I had to go through all this. That was not an expectation. So now I'm angry. And, it really is not that you're angry. It's just you're really fearful of, I didn't know it was going to take all this. Some of us are even ashamed or embarrassed because we had expected something else. And now here we are stuck again, having to go through something else because of the lack of discipline. I'm mad. I don't want to do this no more. Some of y'all out there are shaking your head even as I'm saying this because you are agreeing with what I'm saying, because that discipline is so key. And so I'm letting you know, discipline is not enjoyable, as the word says. But here's the last thing, and Bishop, I'm sure you'll take it from here. As a result of the discipline, there'll be a peaceful harvest of right living for those trained up in this way. Wow.
Yeah.
So painful discipline leads to peaceful harvest of right living. Oh man, that is so powerful. Painful discipline, peaceful harvest of right living. It's almost a play or kind of contradictory. So you're telling me I can get peace from pain? Yeah, painful discipline, peaceful harvest of right living. And just remember that pain is that gap between expectation and experience. So what you're expecting does not exempt you because you got to make sure you get that experience in.
Absolutely, it's somewhat of a matter of delayed gratification.
Mm-hmm.
There's a temporary inconvenience for a long-term improvement, if you will, and and that's a powerful verse because I would just share that church a couple weeks ago. It was one of the quieter moments, but he says that after he finishes talking about faith and all of that, and then he goes into that, and he actually says something powerful. He says it means you're not orphans. It means you haven't been abandoned. It means that there are benefits to good and godly parenting and parental discipline. And let's be honest, we can sometimes tell. Sometimes when we ask those questions in our culture, when we see certain person, did you have any home training?
Right.
because at some point, that even after you've been that, a process called the internalized parent happens, where you can hear your mama saying, get yourself together, or don't talk to people like that. And so all of that is the result of having some temporary moments that didn't feel good to us. but were good for us. And we're not talking about abuses and things again, because so many of us hear through the lenses and see through the lenses of unresolved trauma and those kind of things. And so we're here to help you get the resources. And Dr. Shepherd gave the contact information. So if this is triggering anything, please feel free to take advantage of what he just shared earlier. But discipline is really means correction means I want to see you right. That's really what correction really means, to make right. And that's why he says, I'm doing this because, God does this as a good parent. And so it gives us those disciplines. It doesn't feel good. And this is the last thing, because, we kind of used to be you can abuse that word freedom. And I want to do, and there is, and so all of us have certain disappointments and things, because again, the expectation is different from the experience, and the experience is different. And then we get angry. And I'm so glad you mentioned that, Dr. Shepherd, about the women get angry, the men get angry, that kind of thing, because yeah, we do, and we express it differently. I said before that you can put them in very broad categories, speaking with a very broad, or painting with a broad brush. When people get angry, some people blow up, other people clam up, and you already know which one happens to be more you. You do the silent treatment. The silent treatment can be a means of control. It can be a means of trying to hide our vulnerabilities. It can be a means of making the other person unsure because they don't know what you think. So the silent treatment. It can also be a means of processing. So some people clam up, some people blow up. But the healthier objective I want to suggest is not to clam up or blow up, but to speak up.
Mhm.
And even if you speak up to say, I'm processing, so I'm quiet, but I'll be ready to talk about this. Can we talk about this later this afternoon or something else? You've at least communicated. But the point is, anger has different expressions. Some people withdraw, some people become avoidant, some people disappear. And so there are many ways of expressing it, but it won't really be resolved until we address it and deal with it in a healthy way. And so all of that is part of emotional regulation, Dr. Shepherd, to me.
Yeah, and we want you to resolve it because it flows right into the next piece of information that we'll share as we're in our last 5 minutes of this show. Is that anger is felt as a fiery force that attempts to take over the body. And many of the men in that study that I was referring to earlier, they made a point of saying that they did not like the unpleasant bodily tension produced by the anger. Wow. And that carrying the anger for a prolonged time produced a feeling of great heaviness in the body, a burden that men wish to unload. And that's why we're here today, because there are many people carrying anger and it doesn't feel good. And that's why you can even look at people and say, well, how do you know I'm angry? Well, you don't even have to answer. We can see your body language. You can tell when people are weighted down. You can tell when their body is full of tension. I mean, you tap them on the shoulder and they jump and it's almost like they freak out. And it's not necessarily that they're scared, it's because they're carrying all that tension, that anger. You can tell when people, again, I know you listen to us in a car, in your car, many of you, and you're driving. Have you ever seen someone clutch the steering wheel so hard that their hands turn white because they are just so fearful and angry? Yeah, we want to tell you today, let's let that go. There's such a great heaviness that many of you are carrying. And discipline will help you in doing that. Yes, it may not feel good. I hear you out there. But there is a peaceful harvest if you can stick to it. The word endure comes to mind, which means to remain firm under suffering or misfortune without yielding. So let's make sure that we're enduring. Discipline is part of that endurance. And as we go through, we're coming up at the end of this public health emergency, Bishop, and I'm sure we're going to tackle that at the end. People are fearful and angry about that even. But we must exercise discipline because if we do, we'll have a peaceful harvest in the end.
Absolutely. In our last couple of minutes, we want to remind you to let someone know about Spirit in Mind, but we also want to close out because we do discuss current affairs with faith and mental health perspectives. One of the reasons that I'm passionate about this subject about emotional regulation, Dr. Shepherd, is because I've been in several moments to be able to hear the mayor of our city and the chief of police in our city and other cities as well talk about the uprising of violence in their cities, and Baltimore is one of them. And on multiple occasions, I've heard our mayor and our chief of police talk about violence that is induced by a lack of conflict resolution skills. Meaning it's not you on my turf and we having wars like it's, a Godfather movie. But it is, you dissed me, you messed with my girl, you don't like me.
Yep.
And those kinds of inabilities to express ourselves in any other way besides what you alluded to, anger and aggression, escalates into the senseless loss of potential and lives and kings and queens over really silly stuff. In fact, in one of the more controversial moments, I may have called it something else. It's just that people are dying over dumb stuff.
Yeah.
And so we hope to plant a seed that will help somebody. If you know you need to talk through some stuff, follow up on this moment that you're sharing. It's not incidental, it's not coincidental, but it's providential. I need some help with my conflict resolution skills. I need to know how to talk through some things so I don't just go from 0 to 25 in a second and act on that. That's what we're here for, and we hope that today's installment of Spirit and Mind has been helpful to you. And if it has, please let us know, reach out to us, and then join us next week, because as God gives us grace, we look forward to being here next time on Spirit in Mind.